When 1.6 million left-wing mothers who normally vote Labour suddenly say they prefer Nigel Farage's Reform UK, you know something seismic has happened in British politics. And when that verdict comes from Mumsnet, a platform with 8 million followers and traditionally soft left preferences, you know Keir Starmer is absolutely finished. And Widdecombe, the former Conservative MP turned Brexit Party and Reform champion, just wrote a piece explaining why this poll matters more than any other. Because Mumsnet isn't your typical political forum. It's not Twitter where political nerds argue. It's not Telegraph readers who were always going to hate Labour. It's real mothers, often progressive, often public sector workers or NHS users, often the exact demographic Labour depends on. And they've abandoned Labour for reform. Mumsnet poster might be the new Worcester woman, the median voter who determines election outcomes. And if mothers are choosing Farage over Starmer, Labour is done. Welcome back to UK Political Insight, where we analyze the polls that actually matter. Let's break down why this Mumsnet result is genuinely seismic and what it tells us about the state of British politics. So first, let's establish the context. Reform has topped every major opinion poll for nearly a year. That's not an exaggeration. Poll after poll shows Reform either leading outright or in a statistical tie for first place. So you might think another poll showing Reform ahead, so what? We've seen this before. Except this poll is different because the source is Mumsnet. And Mumsnet, as Widdecombe points out, regularly shows a preference for Labour. It's got 8 million followers. It's a massive online community focused on parenting, family life, practical advice, and yes, politics. The user base is predominantly women, often mothers with school-aged children. These are not your stereotypical Reform voters. These are not older working-class men in former industrial towns. These are often middle-class, educated women who care about public services and social issues, exactly the demographic Labour should be dominating. According to this poll, Reform is no longer the preserve of disaffected conservatives and angry redwallers, but is the party of preference for the nation's mothers. That's enormous. Redwall voters switching from Labour to the Tories in 2019 was a big deal. Those same voters switching from Tories to Reform is understandable given how badly the Conservatives governed. But middle-class mothers, many of whom probably voted Lib Dem or Labour their whole lives, now preferring Reform, that's a realignment. That's not just dissatisfaction with one party or one leader. That's a fundamental shift in what voters want and who they trust to deliver it. The message for Starmer is of course appalling, yet another nail in the coffin of his abysmal leadership, or rather, lack of it. Widdecombe doesn't pull punches. She calls it abysmal leadership, or rather, lack of it. She's saying Starmer isn't even leading badly. He's not leading at all. He's managing. He's reacting. He's making excuses, but he's not leading. And voters, especially mothers who are pragmatic and results-focused, can see that. If you're running a household, managing kids, dealing with schools and doctors and budgets, you don't have patience for excuses. You need things to work. And under Starmer, things aren't working. But Widdecombe argues that's probably not the main lesson of this poll. The main lesson is the confirmation of disillusionment with the political establishment and with the major parties. This isn't just about Starmer being bad, it's about the entire system being broken. Labour promised change. They said after 14 years of Tory chaos, they'd fix things. They'd be different, they'd be competent. And they're not. They're just as bad, maybe worse. So voters are rejecting not just Labour, but the whole two-party system. They're saying, we gave the Tories a chance for 14 years and they failed. We gave Labour a chance for 6 months and they're failing. Maybe the problem isn't which of the two traditional parties is in charge. Maybe the problem is the traditional parties themselves. Widdecombe mentions terms like Mondeo man and Worcester woman, coined by pollsters to describe the median voter who determines election outcomes. These are the swing voters, the people who aren't tribal, who vote based on who they think will make their lives better. Mumsnet poster must surely be a pretty good guide, and she's right. If you want to understand what Middle Britain cares about, Mumsnet is a better guide than Twitter or the Telegraph comment section. Mumsnetters care about the NHS and education. Of course they do. They've got kids. They need schools to be good. They need the NHS to be there when their children get sick. They care about practical things that directly affect their families. Widdecombe notes that Mumsnet users were apparently early indicators of the Brexit tendency. That's significant. A lot of political commentators dismissed Brexit as the concern of old racist men, but actually, a lot of ordinary mothers voted leave because they were worried about immigration's impact on schools and services, about sovereignty, about the EU's democratic deficit. They might not have been shouting about it on Question Time, but they voted for it. And Mumsnet reflected that. So if Mumsnet is now shifting to reform, that's a leading indicator of where the country is going. And now they prefer the blokish Nigel Farage to the bookish Keir Starmer. Blokish versus bookish, that's a perfect contrast. Farage is a man of the people, or at least he presents as one. He's in the pub with a pint, he says what he thinks, he doesn't use complicated political language, he speaks plainly. Starmer is the opposite. He's lawyerly, cautious, technocratic. He speaks in carefully crafted sentences that don't actually say anything. And voters, especially these pragmatic mothers, prefer someone who talks like a normal person and promises to get things done over someone who sounds like he's reading from a legal brief. After 14 years of Tory mess and confusion, they expected Starmer to deliver something better and more hopeful, and he hasn't, so they're looking elsewhere, just as everybody else seems to be doing. This is the key point. These voters aren't naturally right-wing. They didn't start out supporting reform. They gave Labour a chance. They wanted Starmer to succeed. But he's failed, so they're looking for an alternative. And the alternative isn't the Tories, because they already failed. The alternative is reform. It's the only party that looks different, that promises radical change, that says it will actually do something rather than just manage decline, which is what the nation now yearns for above all else. People are tired of politicians who say things are complicated, we need more time, we're making progress. They want politicians who say, this is broken, here's how we fix it, and we're going to do it now. Widdecombe then focuses specifically on mothers. If you're a mom, then by definition, you are focused on what the next generation will have to cope with. That's exactly right. Parents think about the future in a way childless people often don't. Not because childless people don't care, but because parents have immediate personal stakes in what the country looks like in 10, 20, 30 years. Widdecombe lists what mothers want. An NHS which works, not an NHS that's being reformed or restructured, one that actually works when you need it. An education system which is focused on results, not political correctness. Parents want their kids to learn reading, writing, math, science. They don't want schools spending time on ideological content that doesn't help their children succeed. The country to be adequately defended. Mothers care about national security because they want their children to grow up in a safe, stable country. Feel safe on the streets. Crime, especially violent crime, directly affects whether children can play outside, walk to school, go out with friends, and on all these issues, Labour is failing. The NHS is still in crisis, schools are still struggling, defense spending is still inadequate, crime is still a problem. So mothers are looking at reform and thinking maybe they can actually fix these things. Maybe it's worth trying something different. That's the calculus. And that's why this poll matters so much. Because if you've lost practical, result-oriented mothers who care about schools and hospitals, you've lost the election. The 1.6 million figure in the title presumably refers to a significant portion of Mumsnet's user base, or mothers in general who are making this shift. Whether it's literally 1.6 million or whether that's a rough estimate, the point is clear. This is a large demographic shifting away from Labour towards reform. And once that shift starts, it's very hard to reverse, because trust is hard to build and easy to lose. Labour has lost the trust of mothers. They promised to fix things and they haven't. Why would those mothers give them a second chance when there's an alternative party promising to actually deliver? The comparison to Brexit is also apt. Before the Brexit referendum, the establishment said Brexit voters were minority. They were extremists. They didn't represent mainstream opinion. Then Leave won, because the polls missed or underestimated the quiet voters who didn't fit the stereotypes. The same thing might be happening with reform. The political class is telling itself that reform support is all angry old men, that it's a protest vote, that it won't translate to actual election victory. But if Mumsnet mothers are supporting reform, that's mainstream Britain. That's the median voter. And if the median voter has shifted to reform, Labour is done. Widdecombe's conclusion is damning. Starmer is finished. Not struggling, not under pressure, finished. And when you look at the evidence, it's hard to disagree. His approval ratings are the worst of any prime minister at this stage. His party is openly divided, his policies aren't working, and now the demographic he absolutely needs to win, mothers, ordinary working mothers who care about practical things, have abandoned him for Nigel Farage. That's not a temporary blip, that's a realignment. And realignments don't get reversed by slightly better messaging or a cabinet reshuffle. They require fundamental change, and Starmer has shown no capacity for that. This is UK Political Insight, and this Mumsnet poll might be the single most important political story of the year so far. Not because it's a surprising outlier, but because it confirms what many have suspected. Reform isn't just taking votes from the Tories and the Red Wall, they're taking votes from everyone, including demographics that should be natural Labour supporters. If you want to understand how politics is changing in Britain, if you want to stay ahead